Oh hi, my name is Elon Osborne and I like to talk about movies, audio, and music. Today folks, I'll be reviewing the largest speaker configuration I've ever personally experienced. This is all possible due to the AVX17 Preamp from UK-based IOTA Enterprises. When I made this video about the announcement of the MC1 Budget Preamp from Emotiva, several comments suggested I should also look into IOTA AVX17 and ToneWinner AT300. So I reached out to both companies and guess which one actually got back to me. Yeah.
Hooray.
This sandblasted brushed aluminum beauty will set you back $1,833 according to their website, but since they ship to Europe and America, they do have this nifty way of choosing different currencies, such as Canadian dollars, euros, British pounds, and US dollars. It measures 16.7 inches wide, 4.8 inches high, and 12.9 inches deep, which means it's just a little oddly shaped to properly rack mount. So you'll need to install a shelf within the rack if you want to go that route. Weighing in at 12.3 pounds, it's surprisingly light, but such is the case when compared to traditional AVR since there are no internal amps, just circuit boards and ports, etc., kind of like a large Blu-ray player. And according to Two Guys Tech, this does in fact have the same internals as the ToneWinner AT300, so that answers that question some of you might have had. The front is very minimalistic in design with a power button, basic LCD display, 5-button controls, and calibration mic, headphone jack, and a volume knob. By default, the backlit portions like the lettering, power button, and volume knob are very bright. But don't you fret, my friends. You can dim those down or heck even turn them all the way off if it's too distracting in your setup.
What's in the box?
Stuff to read! An assortment of power cords for many different regions, a room calibration mic, 4 basic mono audio cables to connect trigger outputs on various components. IOTA were kind enough to send this Bluetooth adapter to stream music from your phone. Although it is an added expense of $45, 35 pounds, almost 42 euros, or 57 Canadian dollars, eh? There's also a remote that takes 2 AAA batteries, but batteries were not included in the box, just FYI.
It's the little things.
And now, since there's a lot going on back here, it's time to play your favorite game. What the heck do these letters mean? Starting on the left-hand side of the RCA inputs, L and R mean left and right. LS and RS mean left surround and right surround. In a standard 7.1 setup, those are the speakers flanking your main listening position. C stands for center, SW1 stands for subwoofer 1,
LBS and RBS stand for left back surround and right back surround.
LTF and RTF stand for left top front and right top front, meaning your front height speakers. Here's where it gets a little tricky, folks. Let's focus up here first. LTM stands for left top middle, and LW stands for left wide. If you have 6 height channels, this would be assigned to be your middle left height channel, typically flanking your listening position up high, or maybe you have some in-ceiling speakers right above your listening position. Otherwise, you can assign this output to be your left wide channel, meaning it's positioned between your front and surround speakers. And the same goes for RTF/RW, but for the right side. Make sense? Alright, moving on. LTR and RTR stand for left top rear and right top rear, aka your rear height speakers. SW2 and SW3 obviously stand for subwoofer 2 and 3, but where's subwoofer 4? Didn't it say it can support up to... Oh, there you are, you sneaky little devil. And all of those outputs are also available as balanced XLR outputs. Isn't that something? Beyond that, you've got a total of 3 standard RCA inputs, a legacy digital input section consisting of 2 coax and 2 optical inputs, 2 HDMI outputs that support HDMI 2.0 and HDCP 2.2, including one labeled ARC, 6 HDMI 2.0 inputs, Zone 2 output, USB audio, extension port for the Bluetooth adapter, USB dimmer outputs if you happen to have this paired with an IOTA external amp to dim the lights of both preamp and external amps simultaneously, trigger outputs to cause an external amp to automatically switch on or off when controlling the AVX17, and an RS-232 port.
Specs.
This 17-channel beast supports Dolby Atmos and DTS:X codecs and can handle a myriad of speaker configurations including 6 height channels or up to 4 subwoofers. Notice I said or and not and. but I'll get into that later. It has a total of 6 HDMI inputs and 2 HDMI outputs, all of which are 4K and HDCP 2.2 compliant and support HDR10 and Dolby Vision. It boasts a high-quality CS42528 DAC inside, its own room calibration software called EQ Flex, and parametric EQs for serious fine-tuning when trying to make the most of your listening space. It also has a separately controllable Zone 2 if you want a stereo setup in another room, for example. There was also a USB input to plug in a PC if you want, and even stream music via Bluetooth. But just a reminder, that's only possible with the optional Bluetooth adapter. Now, after rattling off that list of features, you might have noticed I didn't mention an Ethernet port or support for Apple AirPlay 2 or other features that seem to be the norm with your typical AVR these days. Well, as it states on IOTA's website,
features that are often purchased but rarely required, such as Wi-Fi, Ethernet, streaming, or DSP gimmicks are avoided. The AVX17 focuses on the most important task, providing the best possible sound regardless of whether it is multi-channel or stereo, whether film, sound, or music.
Wow.
But I would say this preamp is for home theater purists, dare I say audiophiles. Like I stated a minute ago, you can go with the optional Bluetooth adapter if you really want the ease of streaming music from your phone wirelessly. But we all know, at least for now, wired is still going to provide better audio quality. That, and not including the wireless capabilities you're used to, cuts down on the costs to consumers, since IOTA doesn't have to pay any licensing fees to Apple by omitting support for AirPlay 2, for example.
Setup.
I will be creating a separate video going over a plethora of configurations and how to set them up using the IOTA AVX17 as a base for those with preamps in general, or perhaps those with an AVX17 specifically. But in a nutshell, since this is a preamp with no internal amps, hence the term pre or before the amp, in order to power any speakers at all, you will need external amps to perform that task. For this example, I'll be using the Outlaw Audio Model 7000X 7-channel amp. Let's say I wanted to power a baseline 5.1.2 Dolby Atmos configuration. We'll start by using the XLR output since the Model 7000X supports both XLR and RCA inputs, and XLR is balanced and typically provides a cleaner audio signal with a lower noise floor than traditional audio cables with RCA connections. So I would start by going from the right channel output on the preamp to the furthest left amp input on the 7000X. Then connect another XLR cable from the left channel preamp output to the furthest right amp input. Then from the center preamp output to the middle amp input. I do this for two reasons. First, so that the cables aren't crossing over each other too badly. You can literally connect any preamp channel to any external amp input because the amp just powers the speakers, that's it. But I might as well just go straight down to keep it nice and tidy. And reason number two I do it this way is for heat distribution. Your front soundstage is the most active within any surround sound system, so keeping your left, center, and right channels with some buffer channels in between helps distribute the heat more evenly. You don't want to connect your LCR right next to each other or else that side will get much warmer than the other side. You'll wear out those particular amps quicker that way. From here, I'd go from the preamp right surround output to this amp input, followed by the preamp left surround output to this amp input. And lastly, depending on what works best for your soundstage, you could go from the right top front, right top rear, or right top middle output to this amp input, finishing off with the left top front, left top rear, or left top middle to the last amp input. The last connection you need to remember is to take one of the provided mono patch cables and go from this preamp trigger output to this amp trigger input so that the amp automatically turns on when you turn on the preamp. At this point, I would run the room calibration software. In this case, it's IOTA's proprietary calibration software called EQ Flex. Like I said, I'll get more detailed in this step in a separate video. So now you have your speakers connected, room calibration has been run, your source is connected to the rear HDMI inputs like an Apple TV 4K or 4K Blu-ray player, and with the AVX17 connected to your TV or projector's ARC input, you should be ready to go.
How do they sound?
The tricky thing about this subject is that it's largely dependent on your amps, subwoofers, and speakers. So yeah, long story short, it sounded insanely good. But I happen to be rocking Aperion Audio's flagship Verus VAT tower speakers as well as their flagship Bravus 212D subwoofers, but going through my go-to demo scenes, they sounded the best I had heard them. ever. The separation of channels was incredibly detailed. The immersion surrounded me on all sides. Every layer of audio in action-packed scenes could be heard. Not a single layer was overpowering another, which might happen with your more budget AVRs. Quiet scenes were still well detailed, and loud scenes came alive. Dialogue was especially clear even when a lot was going on, which was definitely helped by using external amps to help share the load, allowing the preamp just to process audio like a champ. But here's what I was most impressed with. And this still needs more experimentation to be sure if it was in fact the AVX17 or the amps and speakers and acoustic treatment all working in harmony with each other. But I heard something in this theater I had never heard before in a home setting. And that phenomenon I will call aggressive bass response. But aggressive in a good way, not boomy or overbearing, but a solid, intense, and impactful bass that was not distorted. It was when I was watching the ocean battle scene from Godzilla vs. Kong. Certain moments in that scene took me by surprise, causing me to literally blurt out, "Well, I've only heard that in a movie theater." Needless to say, I was giddy with excitement, knowing that I had literally brought the movie theater experience to that 11 by 16 foot space in my shed. Some cons regarding the AVX17 is definitely its software. It's as basic can get. There's no graphic diagrams like with the Denon or Marantz when choosing speaker configurations. It's just text. There's no HDMI 2.1 support or eARC support, so you can't actually get ATMOS through ARC if you prefer to keep your sources connected to your TV, like if you have a PS5 and a kick-ass TV, for example, and want to take advantage of 4K 120Hz gameplay. But HDMI 2.1 and eARC aren't deal breakers if you prefer to watch movies from your 4K Blu-ray player like I do. This doesn't apply to some of you, but I do prefer support for RO3D, which the AVX17 does not support. Lastly, supporting up to 4 subwoofers is great, but not everyone needs that, even me. I think 2 is enough, even in my home theater space. So since it has support for up to 17 channels, I wish it had more flexibility with configurations to choose from. Instead of being forced to choose between mid-heights or front wides, I wish I could have it all, like a 9.2.6 configuration. But alas, I can only choose either between 9.2.4 or 7.2.6. Womp womp. So who is this for? Well, as I stated at the beginning, this is for those of you who want to keep it simple, don't need a lot of bells and whistles, and just want a unit that provides an incredible listening experience. That was IOTA's intent from the start, to allow home theater enthusiasts to dip their toe into separates territory by keeping costs down, by getting rid of all the fluff, and focusing on the audio processing capabilities, which it does very well. Overall, I am very impressed with this unit, providing me with the literal movie theater experience that I wanted. Giving me the option of RCA or XLR outputs is a huge plus in my book too. There are software bugs and issues that are a bit frustrating, but you cannot deny this unit's ability to process and separate audio to give you an audio experience you will never forget.
And there you have it.
Well, thank you for joining me on this review of the IOTA AVX17. Software bugs aside, I definitely had a wild time with this preamp. It was so much fun going through my go-to demo scenes and getting chills sometimes, especially with the incredible bass response that I was hearing and feeling. So now it's your turn, folks. If you're new or in the middle or deep into your home theater journey, are you considering getting some separates? Would you get a unit like this even though it doesn't support RO3D or 8K or HDMI 2.1 or eARC? Would you still get it just for its pure audio processing capabilities? Instead of getting a preamp that costs $3,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, would you get something like this and start small with like a 5.1 and then just expand over time? Let me know, people. Let's have a conversation. As always, please be kind to each other out there. Don't just watch TV and movies, experience them, and of course, always be listening.